You a United States Army retired Colonel Eugene Davis,
Middle initial J.
and in order to get to know you, I want to know where you come from.
Right.
So, tell me about your parents, man, or grandparents, or however far you want to go back, and then we're gonna get on into it a little deeper.
Right. Well, most people know me by Gene, Gene. And my father, originally from Washington, D.C., and his mother, who I did meet, she came to D.C. from South Carolina. Mm-hmm. His father died when he was 17, and I never got to meet his father, although growing up, all of my uncles on his side and one aunt on my father's side always said I favored their father. Uh-huh. I was light complected, kind of had, these funny color eyes. Mm-hmm. And my father's mother, she was dark skinned, and I think her family might have come from a Caribbean island. Okay. And that's how they ended up in South Carolina. And then she migrated with, I want to say, an uncle to come to D.C. looking for work. Okay. And she met her husband, my father, whose first name is Eugene. Mm-hmm. And they end up buying a house in Southeast D.C., right next to Eastern High School. Okay. My mother, all her family from Columbus, Ohio, and she came from a large family of 10. My father came from a family of 8. Mm-hmm. My mother's family, all fair complexion. My grandmother, I knew for a long time. She died when she was 84, and I was in just starting middle school. Mm-hmm. I did not know her husband. He had already passed. Okay. And my grandmother on my mother's side used to always say that we had some Native American blood because her husband was half Native American. Mm-hmm. And her parents were offspring of actual slaves. Mm-hmm. Okay. And she used to say they worked on what she thought was the Lee plantation. Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize what that was until I got in college.
Uh-huh. Where was that? What part of the country was that in?
Columbus. They all end up settling in the Columbus, Ohio area.
Ohio?
Yeah. And my mother ended up, she had a brother and 2 sisters that end up coming to D.C. to work and teach. Mm-hmm. One of her sisters was a school teacher. Her other sister worked at one of the movie theaters in D.C. And her brother, who was the youngest, he worked at the Library of Congress. Okay. So when she finished high school in Ohio, they brought her to D.C. and she went to, at that time, Miners Teachers College for about 1.5 years before she quit and ended up going to work. Initially at some retail store, and then she ended up working for the Library of Congress. All right. We come from, excuse me, my father, World War II veteran. Mm-hmm. When his father died, he got in, started getting in trouble. his mother kicked him out of the house, and he kind of lived across the street with some folks that owned a corner store there, and they used to feed him and let him sleep over top of the store. Then he got in some trouble and got arrested for stealing, not from the store, but some other place I can't quite remember. Mm-hmm. Found guilty, and they locked him up in Northern Virginia, a place called the Lorton area. Mm-hmm. And then World War II was breaking out, and they gave him an option, you stay in jail or you can join the Army. Okay. So he got released, joined the Army, became a combat engineer for aviation, and he spent his days 44 months in Burma in World War II. Okay. They were in support of he didn't talk too much about it, but what little he would finally begin to kind of talk about it, they were in support of flying supplies, what they call over the hump from Missional, in support of the Merrill Marauders. Okay. Then when he came back, he didn't have a high school diploma, so he went and earned his GED and then went to work at the post office. And he probably worked at the post office close to 40 some years. Mm-hmm. Okay. We grew up in what used to be called the downtown area of DC on 14th and R Street. And when I graduated from high school, my dad finally used his GI Bill and bought a house close to the Howard University campus. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I lived on like the east side of the Howard University campus, and Bill lived in kind of the north. I'm sorry, I lived on the west side. Bill was kind of like northeast side of the campus. Mm-hmm. Okay. In high school, I went to Cardozo High School. That's when I first casually met Bill, because he had a brother that went there. Mm-hmm. And of course, Bill's father, as I recall, was a school teacher at Banneker Junior High School. Okay. And then I went to Howard, excuse me, in 65. It was I was really lucky, Vietnam was kicking off hot. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I graduated from high school, and I didn't get in much trouble in high school. I played basketball. Mm-hmm. Typical few fights every now and then, because in our neighborhood, if you were light skinned growing up, you had to be able to handle yourself. I mean that was just a given.
It's a challenge being light skinned, huh?
Yeah, because somebody would always have something to say. Uh-huh. And excuse my French, you just have to kick off in the air.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
And kind of once, that was established that you could handle yourself, mm-hmm. It kind of became a moot point.
Yeah. Okay.
But when I got out of high school, I didn't realize how serious the war was. I'd been out about, graduating in June. I got my draft notice in August. Mm. We had moved up to this house, and my high school guidance counselor, Miss Bernice Clark, lived across the street. And her husband was a doctor, and he taught at the Howard University Medical School.
Mm-hmm.
And so she saw us moving in. We worked on the house some, and she would come over and kind of talk. And so when we really started moving in, she said, "Well, what are you going to do?" Because she knew I had a partial scholarship to go to a school in Alabama, Talladega, but I, it wasn't paying nothing. I didn't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
I never really left DC for a long period of time. I used to visit relatives in Westerville, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, well, I got this draft notice. And she said, well, I know you didn't do well on the SAT. But I'm going to take you up to Howard. And she walked me up there the next morning. She knew some people, took me in. I was admitted conditionally. I had to take 3 remedial courses. And that was when I first found out that I couldn't read well at all. I graduated from high school literally reading on the 4th and 5th grade level.
Really? Wow.
But I always went to class and I always paid attention.
Yeah, I understand. Mm-hmm.
And I went through high school with one of those little spiral notebooks,
mm-hmm.
put it up in my back pocket because I would always, people used to always, well, I always write down stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was the way I kind of learned to remember it.
Okay.
So that got me into Howard, and my high school basketball coach, Coach Frank Bolden, he told me to go over that the Howard coach had seen me play on the playground in high school. We won the city public school championship that year. And he said, you go over see Coach Thompson. He wants to talk to you. So I did. I went over to see him. And he told me to come and try out because Howard was in the CIAA, the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association. That's where most HBCs were.
Mm-hmm.
And you could play varsity your freshman year in the CIAA. You didn't necessarily have to play freshman ball and then varsity your sophomore year. Other D1 schools, you had to play freshman ball and then you had 3 years to play varsity.
How tall are you?
6'2.5".
Oh man, okay. So you was the right height then. Okay.
Yeah, right. Back then, I even grew some in college. When I first went to college as a freshman, I was only 5'11".
Mm-hmm.
And I had a growth spurt the summer after my freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
Back, I got sick and real weak, and parents took me to a doctor, and he said, and my knees were hurting. I had a condition they call Osgood-Schlatter disease from big growth.
Okay.
And he said, no, he's just had a growth spurt. He's looked like he's grown about a little over 3 inches.
Good gracious.
And
in what time frame? In 3 inches?
I started that growth spurt the spring of my freshman year. Basketball season was over.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right around the middle of April where I felt like I was weak all the time. And I used to like to hang out in the gym after classes and play in the auxiliary gyms. And, I didn't want to play ball.
Uh-huh.
And my knees started really bothering me. So I went to the athletic trainer and he said, yeah, your knees are, and he said, are you losing weight? You look like you're losing weight. And, I was thin anyway.
Uh-huh.
I didn't weigh but about 100 142 pounds.
Mm.
And I said, Jake Felton was the name. I said, yeah, man, I just feel horrible. He said, so he got the athletic doctor to look at me. And he said, you're just going through some type of, growing puberty or something.
Mm.
I said, wait a minute, doc, I'm going to be 19 years old.
Right, right.
He said, no, he said, sometime it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went home, told my parents, so they took me to a clinic in DC called Yater's Clinic. That's where our family doctor was.
Mm-hmm.
And he diagnosed it right away.
Okay. Yeah.
So he put me on on some type of vitamins, and he said, well, we just have to play this thing through. You're just not finished growing yet.
Mm. Okay.
And by July, I was almost back to my old self.
Okay.
But fortunately, I was about, like I said, 3 inches taller.
Good gracious. Man, that's a growth spurt there.
Yeah, which really helped my basketball game.
Yeah. Yeah, 3 inches. I can imagine. Yeah, yeah. What was it like growing up in DC for you as a young boy?
Uh,
What was
it
it like?
it was interesting. I often, when people kind of ask me, I said, "Well, I didn't realize I lived in the, you know, the under income area. I mean, everybody. We grew up in a little apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. My brother, sister, and I had 1 bedroom
Mm-hmm.
on the 3rd floor, apartment 31 of a 4-story apartment building,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole block was nothing but apartment building. And then I only had to walk a half a block to school because I went to parochial school to the 8th grade. And you had to know your way around the street.
Okay.
You kind of had to know that.
Mm-hmm.
You also were very respectful
Mm-hmm.
of all the senior people, because if they told your parents, they saw you out doing something stupid, like the older guys the Catholic school had a little playground, so everybody used to go to the play, and the older guys, they used to buy these big bottles. We used to call them bumpers of beer.
Mm-hmm.
you know, they see you over there sipping some beer or something,
Mm-hmm.
or smoking on a cigarette, they're gonna tell your parents, so you're gonna be in big time trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, the There were a couple gangs, and they just never suit my fancy, because my father's rule was, since he didn't finish high school, is that you may not do anything else, but you're going to be in this house, you're going to finish high school.
Right. Did you consider yourself being a follower or a leader at that age?
I always felt like that I was kind of a leader.
Good. Okay.
I didn't felt like I had to kind of, you know, follow somebody to do something,
Yeah.
or sometimes you kind of get in pushing contests or arguments.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going over here to do that. So, nah, man, I don't think I'm doing that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you kind of that's where I came up. When I saw things getting ready to go the wrong way,
Yeah,
I would tell them, hey, look, I'll catch y'all tomorrow. I didn't never need a crowd of people to be around.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't need that, and I also, now that I'm 78 years old, I always had this feeling that I just had to do something.
Mhm.
It-
You
you
had a calling. You had a
Yeah,
calling.
yeah. I didn't know what it was, but
Hmm.
I wasn't going to be like a lot of the older guys. They get locked up for house breaking,
Mm.
or snatch and purchase. There was a Ma Bell big building up on the corner of 14th Street where a lot of operators worked there, and they were all white, tons of white women. And they would get some of the security guys sometime, particularly in the evening or at night, because they would park in our neighborhood. You know, they didn't have big parking garages. And some of them would ride the streetcar, the old rail streetcars, but the security guys would come out and stand there with them. And just kind of being exposed to, you know, you could tell that they lived a lot different. It was just something different. And I said, you know, I got to find what that difference is.
Yeah.
And of course, the nuns helped out in parochial school.
Okay.
They helped me. They probably helped me more in sports than anything else, because my early years, fourth and fifth grades, I went to public school for the first 3 years of elementary because my aunt was an elementary school teacher. So I used to go clear across town with her, and then came back, and she started teaching. Back then they called them mentally retarded, but it was really special education.
Right.
And she was like kind of pioneer for that in DC. So I couldn't go to school with her anymore. So there was the church I went to, and my family. I had a cousin that was a nun. So I eventually started going to Catholic school. And I'm left-handed naturally, but the nuns were always trying to break you, and you know, because the devil was in you if you were left-handed.
Right. Okay.
And so I would come home, you know, and to this day, you know, I'm not the typical left-hand person that has to curl around the right. You know, I can write straight. I don't smear my ink, because back then a ballpoint pen actually put out real ink.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And we had the ink well that you fountain pen in to write with. And my father showed me. He said, "No, you don't have to do that. Hold your pen like this and write across." So I'd come home and do my homework and come back. Getting in school, they wouldn't let me use my left hand. I had to use my right hand. And when they started, you know, marking me down because you had a grade in penmanship, and my father said, "What? I'm going to the school." So he went and he told him, said, "Hey, that's the hand he writes with." But because of that, for a couple years, I became, you know, able to use both hands pretty good.
Okay.
But they kept me in school to the 8th grade. I got to the 8th grade, and I should have known I had a reading problem, because you had to take tests to get into Catholic high school. And you know, I took the standardized tests, and I didn't pass. And then there were 1 or 2 Catholic high schools that had their own separate tests. I took that, and I didn't pass. So I ended up, you know, going to public school, Cardozo. Cardozo was one of 3 or 4 DC high schools that started having a 9th grade.
Okay.
The 9th grade from Banneker Junior High School migrated to Cardozo, and that was my first year at Cardozo.
Okay. You now you were talking about you in high school you got your draft ticket now, and your counselor now I guess got you into Harvard. Is that where you were going with that?
Howard got me.
Howard.
Yeah.
Now did that negate you going into being drafted back then? Is that something that would
That
negate being
time,
drafted?
at that time, if you were admitted, you took the letter down to the draft board, and they gave you a student deferment.
Okay.
And you had to have satisfactory grades every year, or they would withdraw your student deferment.
Okay.
And then Howard required all male students to either take Army ROTC or Air Force ROTC for the first 2 years.
That sounds like a good thing there. Okay.
Yeah. Uh, unless you were prior service, then you didn't have to take it. You had the option when you got to your third or fourth year, you could get in what they call the advanced corps, where you had to sign a contract, which basically said you're going to continue and you attend advanced summer camp, which was something like basic training and AIT all lumped in one. And then when you graduate, you would be commissioned
Okay.
in a branch that the Army decided they wanted you to be in.
Okay. So you took that path.
Yeah, that was the path I took, and I was in school from I started Howard September of '65. I stayed until June of '70 because one reason I was playing basketball and I was a physical education major.
Okay.
So physical education majors generally we we had 30, almost 20 some more hours in our curriculum. So it wasn't unusual for a physical education major to be a 4.5 year student. And then plus I was in ROTC. So
Right.
that was another course load. And I played ball every year.
Okay.
So in fact, as I remember, I think Bill came to Howard in my junior year because he was in the service and he came to Howard. He was in Air Force ROTC. I didn't know him well. You just kind of casually know other people who were from the DC area.
Okay.
But yeah, my route in school was basketball, ROTC. Uh, my first year, Howard didn't have any athletic scholarships. So after my first semester, coach got me what was called a grant and aid, which you worked 2 hours somewhere on campus, and he was able to get me to work with the physical education department and work at the gym. And that paid your tuition.
Okay.
And I did that for my first 2 years, and after my second year, I earned a ROTC 2 year scholarship, which paid for everything, man. I mean, books. It was great. And
Okay.
getting what they call your advanced years in ROTC, we got a scholarship student got a stipend of $50 a month, and the non-scholarship students in the advanced corps got a stipend of $40 a month.
Okay.
The challenge was when I hit my fourth year, the Army requires you to graduate and conclude your scholarship at the same time. So I took a leave of absence my fourth year from ROTC because by then Howard had athletic scholarships and I had earned an athletic scholarship.
Okay.
So that took care of me going to school at the end of my fourth year. Uh, my wife and I got married, and I really wrapped it up in one more semester. But because of the rule, I had to conclude scholarship and my academics. I took a couple extra courses, and that fifth year, I coached the freshman team at Howard,
Mm-hmm.
and that worked out really well.
Mm-hmm.
I guess one of the most remarkable things besides basketball and ROTC in my third year, I was studying anatomy because I was taking anatomy as a course. And, you have a lab coat and Gray's Anatomy, a Lockhart Anatomy book, and I was getting ready for my orals
Mm-hmm.
uh, in kinesiology, which is a study of muscles and movement.
Okay.
And I had been studying, you had a skeleton, and sometime we would go down to the med school and they would let us actually study on some of the cadavers.
Mm.
Uh, but it was for April 1968, around about probably about 9:15, 9:30. I was leaving uh, we used to call it the girls' physical education building where my skeleton was, studying, getting ready for my orals. I was carrying a lab coat and I had a little dissecting kit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Ran into two of my fraternity brothers as I was kind of walking off campus to get on Georgia Avenue. And we would walk up to the fraternity house because at that time in the spring, they had people pledging. And we get out on Georgia Avenue and don't see nothing but lights all over the place, fire trucks and police all over the place. And
Mm-hmm.
little did we didn't know that Martin Luther King had been killed.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so I should have, my sixth sense told me, well, just go ahead down Fairmont Street and go ahead home. But I went up a couple more blocks and was going to cut over to go up to the fraternity house. And that's when a cop grabbed me. And, back then ain't no cop put his hands on you. Not, not in my neighborhood.
Right.
And so we got to tussling and he saw the white coat and didn't understand it was a lab coat. So the next thing I know, I'm locked up.
Mm.
Uh,
Wow.
about 24 hours, and then someone came through. I guess I was lucky to be locked up early because I actually went to the holding facility in downtown DC. They locked up so many people that they had to take them out to RFK Stadium,
Mm.
and they pushed all the people in there. But
Mm-hmm.
my two fraternity brothers ran. Oh, God bless them. Both of them have passed now. I used to
Mm.
always kid them, but they ran, and I'm glad they did because one of them went to high school with me, and he knew my parents, so he went down, told my parents what had happened, and then they contacted the advisor to my fraternity, Omega,
Mm.
and he got the school involved. So sometime I don't know, I lost track of time. But I realized it was like over 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I heard someone yelling out, my name
Okay.
down the hallway, and they had us jammed in these holding cells with about 30, 35 people in there. And it was Chester. It was no joke. I was in there. I had a sweatshirt on that said "Property of Howard University Athletics,"
Mm-hmm.
and I had an Army field jacket on and jeans.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first got in there was only about 8 or 9 people. Then they just kept bringing some people in.
Mm-hmm.
More and more, they brought in a white guy who looked like a hippie. And well, right away, it directed a lot of attention to him. And so they tried to sodomize him on the bench because,
Oh God.
there was
Yeah.
no sleeping facility, one toilet,
Wow.
one bowl, and, the benches were metal and made into the concrete.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so finally, the guards and the police, they knew something was going on. So they came in there and got him out, and he was all bloodied and clothes torn up.
Mm.
And I just put my back against the wall, and then two guys came over. They wanted my field jacket,
Wow.
and they just started whooping, and I didn't say anything. You know,
Mm.
they kept talking, and when one got close enough, I hit him in his nose as hard as I could,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and didn't say a word, and put my back
Back
against
up
the
against the
wall.
wall.
And I remember they kept saying, "Oh man, that I'm not going." They had some words for me, but that read, you know what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We think he's kind of crazy or something. Because I,
Mm.
I just never said anything. I just stared forward, and so that was kind of your rites of passage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Mm. Wow.
and like I said, I heard somebody calling my name from the distance, and I made my way through all these people in this cell. They said, "Watch out, watch out! Where's he going? He's going to grab somebody." And I got to the bars and waved my hand out and said, "Hey, I'm Eugene Davis."
Mm-hmm.
And there were two lawyers, one
Okay.
Howard, and my parents had gotten a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and they told me, said, "Well, just hold on, we're going to get you arraigned. Just,
Mm-hmm.
just hold on a little bit." They came back about an hour, and I went up and got arraigned and got released on my own recognizance.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a curfew, and I ended up having to go and have a trial by jury because
Wow.
the Army was not going to let me proceed because I was charged with all felonies because DC is a federal principality.
Mm-hmm.
So I was charged with inciting a riot, larceny number two, which was a felony, um, and arson
Mm.
because they were burning down stores and everything.
Yeah, man. They trying to burn. I was in Baltimore that time. They
Right.
trying to burn the whole city down. Yeah.
Yeah. So those were the three major felonies. My high school principal, who was married to the first mayor of DC, she did get me in to see the prosecutor, and that was just a waste of time. All he said was his name was Alvin Bress, and he said, "What do you want?" And I was there with my two lawyers. They made me wear a suit and tie, and they were hoping he would drop the charges because I would have to leave to go to ROTC Advanced Summer Camp
Mm-hmm.
late June. And he said, "Hell no, I ain't dropping none of these charges. All who we locked up, they're all going to be punished."
Mm.
So they pushed for a trial by jury because I had to be found not guilty and acquitted if I
Mm-hmm.
maintain my ROTC scholarship and continue towards trying to get a commission. So I did. We had about 4.5 days in court, and the cops, they couldn't get it together. One white cop, one black cop. One said I was in the store with these kind of suits, and another said, "Yeah, we took the suits, but we couldn't keep them all because everybody was stealing stuff."
Mm.
And so I had my two witnesses. that testified, excuse me, that we were not in the store and that we weren't stealing. And then I had a bunch of character references from school.
Mm-hmm.
And the best character reference turned out to be the professor of military science, Colonel DeWitt Cook.
Mm-hmm.
He came as a character witness. The judge, Judge Burka, halfway to him kind of commenting, the prosecutors said something to him, Colonel Cook. Uh, it's interesting that you're a colonel and you don't have very many decorations.
Mm-hmm.
And Burka told him, said, "You're out of line." And I remember Colonel Cook told him, said, "I'm wearing parachute master wings
Mm-hmm.
that I don't even count the jumps anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wearing a combat infantryman badge and it has a star on it. Means I've been to war twice."
Mm-hmm.
So I was probably, it was funny, he told the guy, I was probably fighting for this nation when you might have been a thought in your daddy's mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so Judge Burka just stopped it right there, asked Cook, adjourned, said, you know, "I want to talk to you in chambers." Well, come to find out, they served in the Korean War together.
Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so when they reconvened, uh, Cook had already come and he says, "Well, they don't need me to testify anymore." He said, I talked to the judge, and the worst case is you will not do any jail time. He said, "If you aren't found not guilty on all charges and they pick you up on something, he's going to use this provision that will not clear your record, but he will sign you a limited probation,
Mm-hmm.
and your record can be expunged in 5 years."
Okay.
And Cook said, that's worst case. Best case, if you want to continue, we keep you in the program. Hopefully you get not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
So ended up not guilty. That was probably the longest 2 hours. The jury left, and I think they were out for like about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
We were kind of hanging around in the waiting room, and my lawyer was saying, well, you know, they may not come up with a verdict today. And just as he was kind of telling me that, someone came back in and said, the jury's ready to come back. They reached a verdict, and they did. They reached 3 not guilties.
Okay. Good.
And man, I was out of there.
Yeah. Wow.
The greatest thing was I was no longer on, they had me on a curfew when they released me in my recognizance.
Mm-hmm.
I could not be out earlier than 6 o'clock in the morning, and I had to be back home by 7:30 p.m.
Mm.
Not April and May, daylight saving time.
Yeah.
I couldn't even hang out on the campus.
Right. Right. Wow. So did you did you finish your commission?
I did. I finished. I graduated on the 5th of June, 1970. I got commissioned that day. Uh, in fact, Chappie James was a 1-star, and he was the commissioning official,
Okay.
Air Force and Army ROTC.
Mm.
And I got commissioned. I was a distinguished military graduate, DMG,
Mm-hmm.
and I was assigned to be a regular Army infantry officer. So I had 10-day leave, and I left to go to Fort Benning, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
where all infantry officers are trained.
Okay. Were you married at that time?
I was.
Okay.
My wife was a year behind me, so we we lived next door to my parents. My aunt lived there, and she had an apartment in her basement of her house. So that's where we were living.
Okay.
And my wife was from DC too. She's from Southeast DC.
Okay. Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
She had a year to finish up in school, so I went to Benning. She was in summer school. After summer school, she came down to Benning for about a month, and we got in a rented little apartment right outside the front gate.
Mm-hmm.
And then she went back. And when I finished up, I was supposed to be assigned to a unit in Benning, the 197th Infantry Brigade.
Mm-hmm.
But people from Fort Myer, the old guard, 1st Battalion Reinforced 3rd Infantry, were down at Benning recruiting. I remember reading something in the Post paper that they were there. And
Mm-hmm.
oh man, if I could go back to Fort Myer, because as a ROTC cadet, our professor of military science, Cook, had left, but Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Williams, for seniors, he found us he called a big brother in the branch. So if you were branch infantry, he'd find an infantry officer around the DC area that would
Mm-hmm.
be your mentor to get you ready to go in. And my mentor was a Captain Gene Bryson, who commanded a company in the Old Guard, which was, the Army Presidential Honor Guard at Fort Myer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I knew about Fort Myers. So I went for the interview. Lord and behold, 3 days later, I get summons, and I'd gotten orders changed and sending me to Fort Myers, Virginia.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now that I guess that was a lot better than Fort Benning, Georgia, right?
Yeah, the
Oh.
unit I was going to was a training brigade for all the schools there at Fort Benning, and they were trying to turn it into what they call a regular TO&E infantry brigade.
Mm-hmm.
And the brigade commander at that time, Colonel Latham, he retired as a 3-star. He only had like 4 regular Army officers in the whole brigade. And he wasn't too happy when those orders came down. That was the first time I got to see a full colonel be a little agitated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I packed up my little Volkswagen and said farewell, and,
Mm-hmm.
um, and went up and signed into Fort Myer. I was started off as a platoon leader in D Company,
Uh-huh.
and then ended. I was a platoon leader for about 6, 7 months, and then the company commander made me the executive officer. The guy who was the executive officer, Todd Exel, he left to go to helicopter training en route to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that was the thing. All lieutenants in the old guard at that time, you probably put in, I forget what we called the disposition form to volunteer to go to Vietnam. I mean, that was, you just did that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had been there right at about 18, 19 months. And then I came down on levy to go to Vietnam. And the assignment officer who was cutting my orders had called me to see if I wanted to go to helicopter training. And I said, well, yeah. He said, because you're flight obligated. Because in ROTC, my senior year, I was in a ROTC flight program. I got 30 hours flying Cessnas,
Okay.
single engine, fixed wing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I never heard anything else about it. So back then, they didn't have no aviation branch.
Mm. Okay.
And so he said, if you want to go, you're flight obligated. All you got to do is because I already passed a class 1 flight physical. He said, you got to go take a class 2 physical. And if you pass it, we're going to send you to helicopter training en route.
Okay.
That's what happened. I took class 2 physical, passed it, end up going to helicopter training in January 72
Mm-hmm.
for 9 months, 4 months in a little place, Mineral Wells, Texas.
Okay.
Was then when you finished there, you went to Fort Rucker, Alabama for your advance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a shrewd awakening, going to Fort Benning. You realize as a city kid from D.C., there's a hell of a lot more white folks than black folks.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And flight school was kind of tough. They had a officers section, and then the other half of our class was warrant officer candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So we had like 38 in the officer section. I think the warrant officer candidates had 45 or 50.
Mm-hmm.
But we never trained together or didn't see each other that much except for gatherings
Okay.
and graduation. But there were four, three other black officers beside myself.
I
And
was about to ask, I was about to ask you that. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and
Out of about how many? How many people total? When you said only three, but
38 commissioned officers.
mm-hmm.
There were three of us that were black, and one was Air Force.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the warrant officer group, they had 45 or 50, and there was only one black
Wow.
in that group.
Wow.
And in the officers group, uh, only two of us matriculated on schedule. One
Mm-hmm.
got set back.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he showed potential, but got set back at Fort Rucker.
Mm-hmm.
So he eventually graduated, but he graduated a class behind us.
Mm-hmm. How tough was it? Going through that training as a black guy. I mean, you can't I guess you don't know what it's like to be white, but still,
Yeah,
how tough was it for you?
my first instructor pilot, never forget him, Robert Downs. He was a retired Air Force major and smoked Chesterfield cigarettes, no filters,
Mm-hmm.
all the way up to, his nails were like yellow in the
Yeah.
tip of his finger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he was, I knew he didn't think much. He didn't talk much.
Mm-hmm.
He was a stern instructor. His second day, when before you solo, he takes you up, and he had three other students, and they were two, one Air Force guy, one Army guy. They talking all the time. They're from the country,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
talking about hunting, and I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
And the second day, we were walking out to the aircraft, and he said, he looked at me. He said, "Davis, what are you?" I looked at him. I said, "I'm me." What do you mean? What? What?
Well, yeah.
No. What? What are you? Mexican, Indian,
Mm.
or something else? I,
Yeah.
I said, "Mr. Downs, I'm a light brown skinned black man." And he said, "Okay." Um, but he was tough. He was tough, and you normally solo somewhere between your 10th and 14th hour.
Mm-hmm.
I soloed at 13 and a half hours.
Okay.
Uh, but because of his discipline, and total adherence to standards. You know, he tell you to fly 60 knots. He didn't mean 58 knots.
Mm-hmm.
He meant 60 knots. And forget
Right on.
about the
Right on it.
updrafts and downdrafts. You
Mm-hmm.
better learn to fly that little training helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
But it really helped me when I graduated. He had told me, he said, I think you're going to do real well.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you really have the best control touch of any student I've had in a long time. So when I got over to Fort Rucker, you know, I just thought he was just telling me that the conscience was bothering him or something, because we never talked much at all.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got over to Fort Rucker, I accelerated through many of those phases simply because I could handle the aircraft real well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
in fact, I finished that phase about 2 weeks ahead of graduation day.
Mm-hmm.
And because of some school rule, a student could not be idle for more than 2 days in a row. So they would, you know, I would still have to go out to the stage field, and then they would let me fly 30, 45 minutes with an instructor,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then come back and say, okay, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Go get on the shuttle bus, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or I'll see you in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
But it was tough. I found Rucker to be a little better because you started getting military instructor pilots instead of the contract instructor pilots.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the academics were pretty rigorous. They had program techs. You know, we didn't have computers, and you almost took a test on some subject every week.
Mm-hmm.
And if your average fell below 75, you're going to be put on like a probation.
Mm-hmm.
But the hardest part is, you know, you got to prove yourself every day to somebody else. I mean,
Okay.
you get rated every day in that helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get an A, B, or C ride, if you get below a C ride, they give you a failing ride, which was called a pink slip.
Okay.
You get 3 consecutive pink slips, they can put you up for what they call a progressive ride, prog ride, with another instructor pilot, a senior instructor pilot.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't pass the prog ride, you're gone.
Okay. Okay.
You know, it's no ifs, ands, and buts.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you now. You said earlier, back when you were in high school, that you was like on a, I'm not gonna quote you, but a fourth grade reading level.
Yeah.
So how did you go from that to college to up to where you are right now, flying helicopters with reading level that low, or maybe just that you wasn't being challenged in reading, you think, or
No, it was really that low. In fact, when I went to Howard, I had to take remedial reading, remedial English, and remedial math. When
Mhm.
I declared a major of physical education, they let me drop remedial math.
Okay.
I never passed remedial reading. I knew I couldn't pass a standardized reading test.
Mhm.
But when I studied, I used to be fascinated with what they call legal pads.
Mhm.
So when I would study, I would read kind of slow, underline or highlight in my book the chapters. Then I would go back and make an outline on a yellow pad.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of time in the dictionary
Mhm.
uh, until gradually I just always evidently had a high degree of reading comprehension. I'm to this day I'm not a fast reader,
Mhm.
but I picked up a lot. And I failed remedial reading. I just didn't take it again. My grades were good. I was carrying most of first couple semesters, like a 2.8, 2.9. And then in my first semester junior year, I like had about a 3.3 and 3.4, kind of straight on through.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really funny that when I got time to get cleared for graduation, I went over to the registrar's office, and the registrar said, "We have a hold on you." I said,
Mm-hmm.
"You got a hold on me for what?" She said, "Yeah, I'm surprised about it too, but you never passed remedial reading.
Mm-hmm.
You got to." I said, "What do you mean? Look at my GPA. I mean, my GPA was like about 3.2 something cumulatively."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I know." She said, you're going to have to go see the dean of liberal arts. I mean, he's the only one that can waiver it." And I was like, "Okay." So I walk over, go to the dean's office. His secretary. Most people kind of knew me on campus because I had a lot of success playing basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And I came in, and his secretary, I remember saying, "Yes, Mr. Davis, the dean is expecting you." I said, "He is?" He said, "He just told me when you show up, just ask you to have a seat."
Mm-hmm.
So I did. And I went in, I went in to see the dean, and he said, "How in the hell did you get a GPA like this? And you've been on the dean's list a couple of times and you can't read?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Dean, that's a good question. That's what I'm talking about." He said, "Well, why didn't you go take that?" I said, "I didn't go take it over again. Ain't nobody stopped me.
Mm-hmm.
Did I go back take it again? I'm kind of doing all right."
Yeah.
He said,
Yeah.
"Okay." He said, "Here's an envelope. Take it back to the registrar. I've already wavered it
Uh-huh.
from you, and they're going to remove it
Okay.
in these transcripts."
Okay. Okay. So now, you did the helicopter thing. Now,
Yeah.
did you go to Vietnam?
No. When I finished flight school, I was supposed to report to Vietnam, but I was on my way to Travis Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
Got to Travis, and Nixon said he wasn't sending any more new replacements to Vietnam.
Okay. And that must have been what? That was late. What? It couldn't have been late. Say what? About 72?
Late, yeah, late. Let's see, I graduated from flight school mid-September, so that was late September, early October,
70 what?
72.
72. Okay. So Vietnam was still hot, but
But still hot, but he wasn't sending any new.
okay.
So I got there, they put me on the phone. Because I was an infantry officer, but I was committed. I had to have a flying assignment for my first, uh, for my next 2 to 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
because I was flight obligated.
Mm-hmm.
So the assignment guy said, "Okay, you got three choices: Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, or Fort Campbell."
Mm-hmm.
And being from the East Coast, I said Fort Bragg.
Okay.
So I ended up coming back, called my wife, said, "I'm coming back. They ain't shipping me. We're going to Fort Bragg."
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Fort Bragg and flew with the 82nd for the next 2 years.
What were you flying?
I was flying Hueys.
Okay. Okay. Now, so you spent 2 years at Fort Bragg.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My first time. Yeah,
Okay.
2 years, and then I left Bragg and went to Fort Benning to the infantry officers advanced course, a 9-month course for
Mhm.
officers.
When did things start to get hot for you? I know you probably, well, I know you, well, tell me this. When did you exit the military? Then I'm gonna jump back. When did you retire?
I retired 1 May 1998.
98. Okay. You retired the same time I did. Okay, so now going, let's go back. Uh you left Fort Bragg.
Right.
You went to where?
Went to Fort Benning, Georgia.
What you do? What did you do there?
I was a student in the Infantry Officers Advanced course,
Okay.
9-month course. Uh, Basically, it's preparing you to work at battalion and brigade level
Hmm.
as a staff officer.
Okay.
Uh, my daughter was born while we were there. She was born on the 10th of May, and I graduated in June and left there and went to Fort Campbell to the 101st Airborne.
Okay. Okay. Tell me now, did you hunt in the first airborne until you retired?
Uh, Damn near.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I had let's see, total of almost 11 years off and on at the
okay.
first.
Uh-huh.
I had my first tour when I first went there. I did not go on a flying assignment. I was on an infantry assignment,
Hmm.
and I was there almost 5 years until they found out what happened to me. I got there. I worked as a assistant operation officer in the brigade S3 office. Then General Powell came to be the brigade commander.
Hmm. Tell me, well, somebody's gonna see this and not know what a brigade is. Describe what you saying when you say brigade.
Yeah, infantry division has 3 brigades. Infantry brigade has 3 battalions in it. Infantry
Mhm.
battalions. Infantry battalions generally run somewhere about 750, 775 troops.
Mhm.
And an infantry battalion will have 5 companies in it. 3 of them will be rifle companies, actually ground pounders, the A, B, and C company. The D company, Delta company, will be the combat support company, which generally has the anti-tank missile systems, anti-air missile systems. And then you have a headquarters and headquarters company,
Mhm.
which
Okay.
takes care of all the administrative, logistical stuff. Uh, the brigade itself has its own headquarters and headquarters company, separate from the 3 battalions.
Okay.
So when Powell came and took over from then Colonel Mahaffey, ended up being a 4-star general. Powell came, and I had just taken command of the headquarters and headquarters company of the brigade.
Mhm.
And I probably I did that for close to a little over 6 months. And, back then you didn't talk too much to senior black officers because
Mhm.
you you didn't know how they were going to come across.
Now, what was your rank about that time?
I was a captain.
And Powell was
I
what?
was full colonel.
He was a full colonel at that time.
Yeah,
Okay.
and he had come out of D.C. and he was a fast mover.
Mhm.
Several below the zone promotions, and he had been a White House fellowship. And in fact, he was coming out of the National War College to take command.
Mhm.
He came to take command in April, but he had to go back to graduate from the War College
Okay.
in when late May, early June.
Mhm.
So when he came back the first time, I was so surprised he popped up over in, we call it the orderly room, my office one evening,
Mm-hmm.
and he just came in and started, asking questions, you know, where you're from, how you do. He said, yeah, I looked at your record, saw you went to Howard University. He went to CCNY, City College of New York, in
Mm-hmm.
ROTC. And so after he had been there about 4 months, and I was in 4 months in my command. And I took 4 days leave and went to see a classmate of mine who had gotten out the Army from the 82nd and had gotten a job at General Motors.
Okay.
And he wanted me to come up there, and because he's pretty sure that they would hire me. So I did. I went up there for a couple of days, and they made me a job offer. And I came back, and my wife, by now, I got like about 5.5 years in the military, so
Mm-hmm.
kind of anxious to leave Fort Campbell
Okay.
because Fort Campbell was still, they still had KKK active
Mm-hmm.
in the Clarksville area.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So I felt obligated, because he was a straight shooter with me. So I got on his calendar one evening to see him, and I told him, I'd gone on this trip and I had a job offer. And he said, well, I don't want to rush you. I really got to get home for something I can't remember. He said, he reached down his drawer. He said, here's a stack of letters. I want you to just read through them, put the rubber band back on them. And when you finish going through them, put them back in my bottom right hand drawer.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about this in a day or two.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. So he left. So I started reading the letters, and there were tons of job offers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from all over the place, and with decent salaries. I mean,
Okay.
still decent salaries.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I've probably gone through about 10 or 15 of them, and it had to be at least 30 or 40 there. So I said, okay, I got the drift. So I put the rubber band back in, put it in this bottom drawer, and I left. And he called me that night.
Mm-hmm.
Said, did you
Okay.
go through the letters? I said, yes, sir. He said, okay, good. His wife's name is Alma. He said, we want to have you and your wife over for dinner day after tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, I said, okay, well, I'll try to find a baby. She said, no, my daughter will babysit. You know,
Uh-huh.
you just bring the baby along too, and she'll babysit while we have our dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So we did. He never talked anything about it. It was just a casual kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and gradually people would kind of look at him and look at me and wouldn't know we were related because we both kind of favored each other a little bit. Although I always kid him, say, I'm the tall, good-looking one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but no, he didn't say anything. And after that dinner, we went back home, and next morning I went in, I did PT, and I came back home, and my wife said, okay, well, what you going to do? I said, I don't know. So I told her, I said, here's 101st coin, air assault coin. I said, the Eagles is going to be head, and the jump wings and air assault wings on the back, that's going to be tail.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm going to flip this coin on this bed right now. Whatever it comes up, that's what we're going to do. And I flipped it. Heads I stayed, tails I go. And I flipped it, and it came up heads.
Mm-hmm.
I said, dear, we ain't going to talk about this no more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hang around, see what's going on. We get good, you got pretty good care. got a nice clean house, a small house, and so I kind of forgot about it. That next afternoon, he summons me over to his office. So I go, and he said, "Look, I know what you're feeling because I felt the same thing." He said, "What I think you need to wait at least until you come in the zone for major and see if you get promoted early to major.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, you can always, there's always going to be a job out there for you.
Mm-hmm.
Back then in the mid late 70s, they were looking for brothers to come and work in these firms.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay. Uh, about a month later, one of the battalion commanders come in and he said, "Okay, Gene, the colonel said I can have you. You you're gonna take a infantry company, B company, first and 502nd." I said, "Sir, but I won't." He said, "Colonel Powell told me we need to do this. I relieved the guy in that company.
Mm-hmm.
So you got 2 weeks to inventory and be down there."
Mm-hmm.
Sir, that means I got to inventory two companies at the same time. But because company commanders are signed for every piece of equipment, weapons, and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell you, that was a hell of a 2 weeks because a headquarters company in a brigade is a large company. It has about, probably about 190 people in it, but it has tons of equipment, generators,
Yeah.
weapons, all sorts of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
radios,
Yeah.
helicopters, because it had a helicopter platoon
Mm-hmm.
with 10 helicopters in it. So, so then I get on the phone, call, speak to Colonel Powell, and his adjutant, a major, said, "Well, he's tied up right now, but he told me, he said, if you call, he wants to know, did you get the word from Colonel Michaels, Lieutenant Colonel Michaels?" I said, "Well, yeah." He told me, he said, "Well," he said, that's all he got to say. You're going to go command B Company, 1st Survival 2nd in 2 weeks."
Mm-hmm.
So,
Now that was like an automatic promotion, though.
well,
Really? Wasn't
it certainly set it up because what happened, I ended up commanded that rifle company for 18 months,
it? Mm-hmm.
where normally you command for 12 months.
Okay.
And we did a couple of deployments. And then I came back, changed command, and I went to that battalion staff to be the personnel officer. And we were up at West Point training West Point cadets
Mm-hmm.
when I got a phone call from the division commander of the 101st, the 2-star, had called to congratulate me. And I didn't realize, but I was in the secondary zone by 40 some days. I mean, just barely in it.
Mm-hmm.
I got promoted below the zone to major,
Okay.
and he was calling to congratulate me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so that worked out. I stayed at Campbell about another 10 months. I moved into a major's position at the battalion as the battalion operation officer, even
Okay.
though I hadn't pinned on my rank yet.
Mm-hmm.
But that also alerted infantry branch that I had not been overseas. I was a non-Vietnam vet,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm getting ready to make major.
Okay.
And when they called, they said, "It ain't but 5 or 6 of y'all like this, but they're overseas, and we got to get you somewhere."
Mm-hmm.
So he said, "We're going to send you to Hawaii for a flying assignment."
Okay.
I said, "Okay, that'll work. That'll work." Went
Mm-hmm.
home, told my wife. 3 days later, they called back, said, "Nah, we got to change this. We got to get you as close to a combat assignment we can get you. We're sending you to the DMZ in Korea, to the
Okay.
Second Infantry Division, to
Mm.
command aviation company there.
Okay.
So, so yeah, I mean, you know, it 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 did work out good. Needless
Mm-hmm.
to say,
Where,
I ended up staying.
where did you go in Korea?
I was in Korea from May of 79 to May of 80.
Mm-hmm. Where about?
I was at Tondushan.
Okay, that's
That
just right out of Seoul.
no, I was north. We used to call it. I was north of what we call the No Smile Line, north of Uijeonbu,
Okay.
up there where Camp Houses, Freedom
Mm-hmm.
Bridge,
Okay.
Camp Toby
Mm-hmm.
was all up there. I commanded B Company, which was a general combat support company, largest aviation company in Korea.
Mm. Okay. You took the family with you there.
No, it was back then. It was unaccompanied,
Okay.
considered a short tour.
Gotcha. 1 year.
1 year, yeah.
Short tour. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. So where'd you go from Korea?
From Korea, I had gotten selected to go to the Command and Staff College, but I did not go to the Army Command and Staff College. I went to the Marine Corps Command and Staff College at Quantico,
Okay.
which probably the second best assignment I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one is close to DC, but
Right.
two, uh, you went there. I kind of just liked everything the Corps was about, you know, from being in the 82nd and 101st.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Corps certainly understood the type of breed of officer, infantry officer I had kind of become, because the Corps have infantry officers first and then they become aviators.
Okay.
Uh, the Army started the aviation branch when I came back in 80. The branch actually stood up in 81.
Mm-hmm.
So I was grandfathered and was allowed to have a primary specialty of infantry. And then my secondary specialty was aviation. So I had two combat specialties.
Okay.
There were a handful of us like that in infantry and artillery.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I kept that uh, all the way through retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Although I did not get another assignment to an aviation unit until I was a full colonel
Mm-hmm.
uh, at Aviation Troop Command in St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
chief of staff there. Uh,
Okay.
but I just kind of tracked along, although I would get picked in both areas to like command a battalion, I was picked in both categories. And the commanding general at the 101st wanted me to come there early and take an infantry battalion
Mm-hmm.
because he had a battalion commander he was releasing early to go to command a ranger battalion.
Okay.
And or I could have waited and gone back to Korea. I would have had to wait about 9 months, 10 months to go back and command the combat aviation battalion in the second infantry division,
Mm-hmm.
the one that I flew for. And I told him, I said, ain't no choice for me. I'm going back to 101st.
Okay. So you didn't go to Iraq or any of those places.
No. I was when Iraq went down. I was in Panama. I went to Panama right at the tail end of Just Cause.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
when they stood up Joint Task Force Panama.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I had I had gone from the Marine Staff College. I went to Howard ROTC. Then I went back to the 101st. I got selected to command that infantry battalion.
Okay.
Uh, then I stayed at the 101st to be the inspector general for the 101st and Fort Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
Um, while I was in command of that infantry battalion, I had a handful of key deployments. One was to Somalia before Somalia had really become fashionable.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we had deployed there, deployed back. I did the Gander recovery
Okay.
because that was my sister battalion that uh, had crashed.
Crash. Got
Yeah,
yeah.
and then I when I left Fort Campbell after the IG job, went to the National War College. They ended up keeping me there as an instructor. I was not happy about that. Then Just Cause kicked off, and one of my mentors, he was in the 82nd, but they were going to keep him there. U.S. Army South. He was going to become the new deputy commanding general,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted a commitment that they let him put in a new operation officer, and he wanted me to come. So that's how I ended up getting down to Panama at the end of Just Cause. Then they did something what they call promote liberty, which,
Mm-hmm.
even though that on paper the war had ended, but we still had a country to run
Yeah.
and train the police force, and get the political entity, get the embassy open up again, and all that stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So then when the Iraq war kicked off, I was still at Panama to keep my daughter in the same high school. I went down there on the short tour rules, but I committed to extend
Okay.
so she could stay in the same high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in Panama 25 months.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Iraq kicked off, and I was hoping I was going to get released from Panama because they were talking about I was on the alternate brigade command list for infantry. And they were talking about they're going to put some infantry colonels there in theater just in case we would work with, like I would probably work with 18th Airborne Corps headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
So if for some reason they needed another colonel, at least I would be up to snuff.
Mm-hmm.
But my boss that time, U.S. Army South and Joint Task Force Panama, the day the Army was calling to ask if he was willing to release me, we had a huge coup attempt.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mm.
4 or 5 December 1990, when one of the Herrera Hassan, who was a former colonel for Noriega, he broke away from Noriega, uh, but he got wrapped up in all the political stuff, so he was arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, he kind of ran an organization that they call it's called Petahota. It's kind of like a combination of your FBI and CIA.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so they took him out that position. He got locked up. Some thugs flew into the prison, literally, landed in the yard, shot up the place, went and got him out, and took him back to the hood of Panama
Mm-hmm.
and uh, El San Miguelito. which is kind of really the real hood of Panama. Then
Mm-hmm.
they went and took over a government complex, about 300 of them, and they had 12 U.S. Officers in there who were like an advisory team to the government,
Mm-hmm.
held them up. So we had to get through 4-5 December, all hostage negotiation and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was full fledged. We had the big guys, Delta, everything on the way
Yeah.
to kind of deal with that. Then they panicked, and we had a place cordoned off, but they panicked and tried to break out. So we captured most of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So that and so that was back in what time frame was that? In the 90s?
Yeah, that was 4-5 December 1990.
Okay. Okay. So you left from Panama and
Panama in April of 92.
okay.
Came back to the Pentagon
Mm-hmm.
and worked in the Army Operations Center.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When did you make Colonel?
I made Colonel in Panama. Uh, well, I got frocked, and let's see, May May or June of 1990.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it had to be May because I made Colonel right before I had 20.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you ended up with a total how many years?
Uh, all total, uh, 28 years, 8 of them as a colonel.
Mm-hmm. And you ended it at the Pentagon.
No, I left the Pentagon and sent on a HAYU assignment to go to a place in St. Louis, a logistics command called Aviation Troop Command.
Mm-hmm.
They had relieved the chief of staff, and then the chief of staff of the Army, General Sullivan, because I was responsible for help putting his morning briefings together for him and the secretary.
Mm-hmm.
He had noticed that I was an infantryman and an aviator,
Okay.
and he kind of inquired, and another 4-star that ran Army Material Command got involved, and then the Inspector General of the Army was involved because they're having a lot of problems out in that command.
Mm-hmm.
And he evidently brought to the table that I was also a certified Inspector General, completed
Okay.
the course and
Mm-hmm.
and everything. And so I got summoned one mid morning to come up to the Chief of Staff office.
Mm-hmm.
And a good friend of mine was the Chief of Staff XO, who had just come out on the BG list. He and I had a couple of tours together at the 101st. And so I said, Dave Oley, I said, Dave, you know what this is about? He said, well, you want a cup of coffee? I said, I said, shit, is that bad?
Yeah.
He said, nah, we got pretty good coffee up here. I said, well, you think I got time for it?
Yeah.
He said, yeah. He said, I even get to fine china for you.
Mm.
And so he poured me a cup of coffee, and I sat there. And next thing, he goes in the chief's office, and he comes back out. He says, okay, the chief will see you now. I said, good timing. I just finished my coffee.
Mm.
And I go in there, and sitting around the chief's table is the chief and the Army Material Command commanders there, another 4-star,
Mm-hmm.
the vice chief of staff, who is a 4-star,
Mm-hmm.
and then the inspector general, who is a 3-star.
Mm-hmm.
And the chief told me, Gene, come on in, have a seat. I said, well, sir, um, should I be standing for this? He said, well, why do you think that? I said, I haven't seen this many stars in one place since I took astronomy. I said, something must be up, and generally it ain't good.
Uh-huh.
He said, no, no, sit down. He said, we we want to send you somewhere to be a chief of staff. So right away, I started thinking of guys I know, like 101st chief of staff, 25th Infantry Division chief of staff I knew in Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
chief of staff of the 82nd I knew.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh man, I wonder when these guys got hurt or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what is that? And you know, sometimes you say the dumbest things when people surprise you. He said, have you ever heard of aviation troop command? And I had remember one night when I was in the ops center, I was reading through the paper and they had some issues up there and got written up, and Inspector General had been up there, and in fact, Department of Defense Inspector General had been up there, and I said, well, just briefly, I remember reading through the SIP reps. You know, there were some issues with the command. I said, all I know is in St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, well, that's where we want to send you because you're an aviator too. And I thought, and I said, you know, I just said, sir, you know, I haven't served in an aviation assignment since like 1980 in Korea, actually involved with flying helicopters and managing them. I said, you know, in 101st, yeah, you know, we're air assault unit.
Mm-hmm.
My task force moved around by helicopter, but he said, no, we don't care. We don't care about you being an aviator. We care about you being a good infantryman because they need some good infantry discipline up in that outfit. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, oh, okay. So when is this supposed to happen? He said, well, we're going to send you to Army Material Command. Their chief of staff, General Johnny Wilson, 2-star, he's going to give you a mentoring through for about 3 weeks, and you got to be up there a couple of days after that.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, holy shit. So that's what happened. I left the Pentagon. I wasn't in the Pentagon long enough to earn your Pentagon Army Staff Badge. You got to
Mm-hmm.
be there a year. So that was the got to be a mid level full colonel, and I boloed.
Mm.
I didn't earn that badge.
Mm. Okay.
So yeah, I went to St. Louis. Was there about uh, 15 months. Then I came out on the command list again. They started a new category called Garrison Command.
Mm-hmm.
And I came out on that list because I was getting ready to retire. You know, I had my more than 3 years in grade, so I could keep my rank.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to retire that summer and come out with a little over about 24 years.
Okay.
Uh, but I came out on that command list and ended up going back to Fort Campbell to command the Fort Campbell garrison.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you said something about logistics. You work with a logistics command.
Yeah, that aviation troop command in St. Louis was a very large depot level logistics command
Mm-hmm.
for everything the Army had,
Mm-hmm.
to include special operations.
Okay. Yes, I'm a logistics guy, so I want to know how was it for you working with those logistic guys.
Well, um, it was very interesting. I got there. Nobody knew I was coming. It was planned that way. I drove in the secure gate there. They didn't know who I was, and I told them I have a letter here from the Chief of Staff of the Army that I got to give to the commanding general. And so they let me come in, visiting parking. They showed me where the headquarters was, and I went up there and I walk in, and everybody's looking around. Well, who is this, Colonel? And I said, well, and it was time that I arrived like 10:30 because the commanding general aviation troop command was going to get a phone call from General Ross, the 4-star Army Material Command, the higher headquarters, that he was going to have a visitor, which was me, that was going to be the chief of staff, and that the commanding general, General Williamson, was going to have a change of command in a month and a half, and he better plan his retirement. So, yeah, I kind of came in, and of course, when word got around that I had that letter, and that, of course, General Williamson is now kind of pissed off, and so, and they had Chester, they had a bunch of colonels up there. I had never seen that many colonels, so I had kind of read about the command, and I'm kind of walking around, and so the first thing that I did the next day, I had a PT formation of all the military, regardless of your rank.
Oh man. Okay.
And they weren't used to that. Uh, Half of them showed up in all sorts of attire. I said, well, where in the hell is your PT uniform?
Right.
Oh, hummer. And, some of these kind of fat, out of shape colonels, they were worried. So,
yeah, I was wondering what did it look like overall?
yeah, I had it set up. It was probably about 400 and some military in that command. And so I'd gotten the communications people to set up, a PA set on the football field in the compound. And so they set it up, and I got up there and, standing on this little makeshift stand they made. And I said, okay, I just want to see everybody. Because in the infantry, we normally kick off the day with some PT.
Right.
And I realized that this is a logistics command, and y'all don't do that. But I'm a little worried. I don't think y'all even doing PT on your own.
Right.
So we're going to go on a 2-mile run. I like to do 4, but we'll start out with 2. And we're going to be doing these PT runs once a week.
All right.
And I'm the new chief of staff. And I see and I hear there are a lot of colonels here. Some of you all I met when I was walking around. But I am the colonel of all colonels. And
well, you the ranking man?
I was not the senior time and grade colonel, but I was ranking colonel by position.
A position. I got you.
And so, and I said, if y'all have any real issues about that, my open door policy is every day after 6 p.m. 18.
All right. I got you.
So you can stop by and we can chat about it. But in the meantime, this is the way it's going to be. And everybody better start getting ready because I'm going to have trainers come up from the Army Fitness Center to give us all the PT tests in 60 days.
Okay.
And so I was like persona non grata. They had a lot of racial issues. Of course, the black people there were singing, "We shall overcome, hallelujah, we got a savior here." And then the white people are saying, who the hell is this guy?
Right.
And so the first couple of months was really really had to. I mean, it was rough.
Yeah.
I started with stuff I knew. I know Operations Center, Logistics Command like that had the best operations center I had ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
They had, I mean, it was like Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
because they're sending stuff all over the world.
Yeah.
And man, I mean, I was just salivating
Mm-hmm.
uh, to to be in that operations center.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of tough. I had about a half dozen colonels that tried me, and I fired them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Told them,
What
oh,
was what was the racial say black and white in that logistics group or
in the logistics group, I would say it was about 70-30 white.
what, 70 white, 30 black? Okay.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and St. Louis is a unique city.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm like up there in 90, was it 93 I got up there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh Brothers still going around in Nehru suits and Jerry curls.
Is that right?
You know, Cadillacs with big white wall tires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was like time had just kind of stopped.
Uh-huh.
Uh there was a big South St. Louis area had been developed to be a big industrial area. It fell through.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like going through an evacuated city. I mean, these huge buildings just vacated.
Mm-hmm.
Street people lived in them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was just, I mean, it was just really strange.
What now if you know what was the industry that left that area?
Uh, it was going to be a huge financial industry, very much like Charlotte is,
Okay. Okay. But it
because
never made it.
it never made. The idea was, all the hubs for financial
Mm.
and most of the manufacturing is on the East and West Coast.
Okay.
So St. Louis was going to be in the middle, kind
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and all these, big Bank of America, this bank and that bank, they had built these buildings because they're going to have their corporate offices there.
Mm-hmm.
There was going to be something very similar to like a Wall Street too.
Okay. Okay.
But evidently, what happened, I guess, as I recall, there was a dip in the economy,
Mhm. Yeah.
and um, people just, I guess, lost kind of confidence,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and they gave up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Plus,
Okay.
they were sending a lot of stuff overseas,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so the next thing, of course, before I got there, these companies were pulling out.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. So how you said it took a while to get them in shape, but once you got everybody in shape, that they kind of come to a
Yeah, yeah,
appreciation point.
yeah. It probably took about a week.
Oh, it took about a week to get
Yeah,
them over.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in all seriousness, some of them, certainly bucked it,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a choice. I said,
Quick though.
you can call Colonel Division, because full colonels in the Army are managed by a separate personnel division.
Okay.
I said, you can call Colonel's Division, use my name, and if they can't reassign you, you're gonna have to retire
Mm-hmm.
if you don't want to be here.
Mm.
And
Okay.
because you ain't gonna be here disrupting what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously with I had like 38 major inspector general findings
Mm-hmm.
dealing with EEO,
Mm.
finance, sexual harassment.
Wow.
Um, After General Cowens came in, the new general, because I didn't even know who he was until after I had got there. Then they had called me and said, "Now I want you to speak to your new boss."
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he turned out to be black.
Okay.
General Cowens, he was on the joint staff, a key logistician, and a great guy. And when he first came, I mean, just a wonderful guy, so kind personality. And he used to call me in, and sometimes he would say, "Chief, take be be a little more easy going." I said, "Sir, I, I, I just got to be me."
Gotta be you. Yeah.
And these loggers have been up here living too easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that look at all these write-ups. So
Mm-hmm.
put me in charge of resolving these findings,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up having to go through the deputy chief of staff of personnel manpower for the Army. I spent like 3 days on Capitol Hill testifying before the what was that committee? Government Personnel and Government Affairs in the House.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go and testify before that committee on all 38 of those findings
That bad, huh?
and how, yeah,
Oh.
it was a lot of midnight oil and a lot
Mm.
of sitting down talking with people,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of moving people around.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we ran while I was there. We actually went through 3 reductions in force.
Mm-hmm.
People had just been there and got lost
Mm-hmm.
and thought it was kind of happy. The thing that probably gave me the best camouflage was Department of Army and DoD had just come out with that no smoking policy
Yeah.
inside.
Right. Right.
Couldn't smoke within 50 feet of an entrance, an
Mm-hmm.
exit.
Yeah.
And I jumped on that with 2 feet because you ain't got to be no loggy to figure out how to do that.
Right. Right.
Uh, First thing I did was to go to our cafeteria
Mm-hmm.
and break up that smoking down there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we established a smoking area, but we had to get a new uh, HVAC system and then built some like plexiglass walls
Mm-hmm.
for the smokers to sit.
Yeah.
And I only built it big enough for like 30 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
I I tell you, man, to me, that's one of the best things that ever happened
yeah.
when they came up with that because I know the unit that I was in at Dover. Man, those guys, we had civilians plus military, and when those guys were coming in the morning and get to smoking in that building, I mean, you walked in the
Oh,
hall.
yeah. And and back then I was a pipe smoker.
Okay.
So, it's not like I would smoke. I wouldn't smoke in my office. I,
Hmm.
I'd get up, and after I eat lunch, I'd go outside. We had a little quadrangle. I'd go out there and draw me about a half a bowl of pipe tobacco,
Hmm.
camp it out, and get back to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I put in a policy that if you were a smoker, we put up these little shit look like bus stops, you
Hmm.
shelters.
Yeah.
I put up now Aviation Troop Command sits on something, a piece of property that is probably about about the size of it's pretty big. That piece of property, if I remember, was 20 some acres.
Mm-hmm.
So I put up about 5 or 6 of those shelters around, and I told them, I said, you got to smoke there,
Okay.
and you have one smoke break before lunch.
Mm-hmm.
You have lunch, and you have one smoke break after lunch.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't gonna be running around out here
Smoking all day. Yeah.
smoking. And
Mm-hmm.
I used to go down to the loading docks because the brothers there would rat people out. See,
Mm-hmm.
they mad at them anyway.
Yeah.
You
Uh-huh.
he said, "Hey, sir, they go there be smoking there behind those dumpsters."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that, brother. Took me 2 days. I had concertina wire
Mm.
put up.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Now, when they sent you there, did you know you were going there as a fixer, or it was that
yeah,
bad?
yeah. I had 2 weeks to work with General Wilson
Mm-hmm.
through those 38 allegations and some other things. And I worked with Lady Edna Boone. She was the president of the St. Louis NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
And that lady was a tough nosed lady.
Mm-hmm.
She asked, "Well, when are you going to promote Mr. So and so and Miss such and such? She should be a GS 14 by now." And I said, Miss Boone, I realized, I said, Martin Luther King couldn't make up for slavery.
Mm.
so, so I made, I can't sit here and tell you, I know there were wrongs,
Right.
but I'm not going to be able to equate that into, a 2 grade promotion.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Reparations. You want reparations, huh?
yeah, those things, it's not reparation. I mean, it, they, are they qualified to work at that level? At,
Right.
at training, I
Yeah.
said, I got to look at all of this. I said, these allegations, I said, I'm sharing. I used to bring her up to the headquarters to go in what I call my battle room,
Mm-hmm.
where, I had stuff all up on the wall and
Mm.
let her know what the progress was.
Like a crime scene.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And plus our command EEO officer, uh, when people feel that they're not treated right, everything was an EEO complaint.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, how to sift through what is EEO versus laziness and noncompliance?
Right.
You, you
Yeah.
know, you just can't. You just don't feel like this, or you don't feel like you should work over here anymore. I want to go and work with the people over in distribution.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why do you want to do that? Well, I always wanted to go over there, and plus I got 6 friends, and we do. And I found out shooting pool that they do this. I said, my friend, I appreciate you coming past.
Mm.
I can't help you with that.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
I mean, you're you're assigned here to the warehouse. Okay, so we need you to do that for right now until we go through this reconfiguration.
Yeah. Sound like they needed a reconfiguration. I mean, it sound
Oh,
like there's a
yeah,
lot going on.
we went through legitimately, because the only way, as you know, in the government, you have to run a RIF to reshape your workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And and we did, we got rid of a lot of positions. Some people uh, got moved to places that they didn't want to go,
Mm-hmm.
and then some sections we just had to do away with altogether. I mean, there was no more use for them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we we had a place because they had a big Charles Melvin Price Support Center was across the river in East St. Louis. We had a little Army post over there, and that's where a lot of records were kept. And they had that big fire.
Okay.
The Army had this huge fire, lost a whole lot of records, former service members, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another reserve 2-star command in St. Louis that kind of took care of all those records.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had people that used to work there, and all of those warehouses burnt down, and they burnt down probably about 3 years before I got there.
Mm.
And they're showing up just sitting around.
Wow.
How do you kind of justify that?
Right. Yeah. So did you actually get rid of people or just reposition?
We a combination of both. We let a lot of the probational people go.
Mm-hmm.
We bought people out. I had permission to offer buyouts.
Mm-hmm.
We did buyouts. I worked with Mayor Freeman of St. Louis, a brother, and he was also a fraternity brother too. He took a few people in to work for the local government.
Mm-hmm.
He had some friends at Anheuser-Busch who took some people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we probably ended up in the reshaping. I would say 95 people
Mm-hmm.
didn't.
Okay.
They just didn't fit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You didn't go in there like Elon and Trump.
Uh,
So you kind of understand what's going on then with
yeah, um,
what's going on right now.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. You know, I know it looks kind of messy, but
It does.
experience in St.
Looks
Louis,
chaotic. Chaotic is a
yeah,
better word. Yeah. Okay.
my experience in St. Louis and then at Fort Campbell, went there. We had a right size, and Forces Command got me some contractors that were familiar with something called the Baldrige
Mm-hmm.
process, which is a streamlining organization to work effective. And but the first thing you kind of do, and I would always do, I would look at money.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the money going?
Mm-hmm.
And I, particularly up in St. Louis, I probably killed about easy 15 or 20 contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. Why are we, why did they get that option year? Well, they come and remove grease from the cafeteria and the 2 snack bars.
Mm-hmm.
And we are paying them to remove the grease. They should be paying us because they take that grease, and that
Mm-hmm.
grease is used to make cosmetics.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I said, and our acquisition officer and our contractor, well, sir, I said, no, I said, I tell you what, you need to get their president, whoever it is, we need to have a meeting
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
I am not paying him
Mm-hmm.
to do it anymore. Then I call Anheuser-Busch, talk to their people down there, and they got people picking up grease
Mm-hmm.
that pay Anheuser-Busch
Yeah. Handful. Yeah.
because they can use the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was kind of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then we probably had about, I would say very easy. 40 people getting paid that we didn't need.
Mm-hmm.
Just, because I was going position by position. I'd get the personnel officer in there,
Mm-hmm.
the acquisition officer. I sit them around the table, and and it was like a rock grill.
Yeah.
We pass a rock around. Okay, tell me about this position. Who's
Mm-hmm.
position? What does that position do?
Mm-hmm.
What's the output?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I said, when you start welling me, that's telling me that's something we don't need.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You just can't. Well, that's why I got authority to run a full scale RIF.
Mm-hmm.
But before you run a RIF, you got to shape the organization that you need, and this is what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're going to RIF. A lot of organizations run a RIF within the current organization you got.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see the organization we need to do A+ work in these areas. And so it's kind of funny. I had people all over to start out, and computers weren't, real heavy then. The op center had plenty of computers, and some of the directors' offices had computers.
Mm-hmm.
I had it, and that was something else. There were 4 SESs,
Okay.
one
What's that?
star
What's that?
equivalent,
What's the SDS?
senior executive service,
Okay.
uh, and they're like civilian generals.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I had put out a memo that I wanted everybody to write down the 3 most important things they did, how many times they did it in a week, and what it produced.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a very simple map like thing.
Yeah.
And I put it out, gave them 4 days, and I want them all turned in.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and man, you talk about an uproar.
Mm-hmm.
you know, well, people would stop me because I always did a lot of MBWA management by wandering around.
Mm-hmm.
People say, well, Chief, what goes in here? I said, well, what do you do? What are the 3 things you did? So what did that achieve for us? Well,
Mm.
I, I don't know. I just finished that report and I put it in the file. Well, do
Mm.
we need that report?
Yeah.
Well, we've always done it that way, And I said, when you start telling me, we always done it that way. It's always been that way. I said, if you're in a business spending your own money, would you spend your own money to do it just because it's always been done that way?
Yeah.
So it,
Yeah.
it was a really big learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to Campbell, I had to go to every time you go to a new command, they send you to what they call the commander's course. So they had set up a garrison commander's course, and part of it was to go and shadow a city manager.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a chance to go and shadow the city manager down in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I learned about the Baldrige criteria. And that that was really so helpful because running an army garrison or any garrison base commander, it's a city you're running.
Mm-hmm.
It,
Yeah.
you know, you 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 got to manage it.
Yeah.
Uh, the only good thing, I used to kid all the mayors in the surrounding towns of Port Campbell and the county executives. I said, well, I have one difference from y'all. Y'all got elected. I got selected.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I, I got a 2-year assignment.
Uh-huh.
And unless the general is going to fire me, I ain't got to worry about pleasing a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. So you spent 2 years there?
Yeah, it was a 2-year command tour.
So you got it straight, but I guess your time there, for a while there, I guess you was probably the most hated person on the camp for a
Yeah,
while.
it
Until
it
they-
it would get pretty tough. Now, when I went back to Fort Campbell, all those, it was a lot of things you had to get into. But people really gave me a lot of respect because of
Right.
my previous tours.
Mm-hmm.
And jokingly, people say, a lot of time at Fort Campbell, you belong to the mafia,
Mm-hmm.
the part of the mafiosa. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, because people have remembered me from being a captain, a lieutenant colonel, and now a colonel there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, and I used a lot of them to be on the teams to help us to reshape. I had an old ammo bunker that we put them all in. I sequestered them all,
Mm-hmm.
and they would go out and actually do what I call an audit. Literally go to the section. Let's see what they're doing. Copy it down. Do we need to continue to do it that way?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we would have an update generally weekly until we kind of got through the whole thing, and then we said, okay, this is our new organization. Now we're prepared to run a riff.
Mm-hmm.
And some people got unhappy. I know one lady that I moved out of one of the fire departments.
Mm-hmm.
She was having some issues anyway
Mm-hmm.
with the chief, so her record showed that she had had experience working in personnel.
Mm-hmm.
So wiped out her position and relocated her
Yeah.
over to director of personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then she kept coming back to the fire department. And so the chief would call and said, she keeps coming back over here, and the director of personnel. I said, well, okay, I tell you what, chief, you and my director of personnel, you get her. We're going to sit down at 5 o'clock today.
Mm-hmm.
Then the phone rang. Oh, but she said she gets off at 4:30. I said, you know what? You tell her she can go home at 4:30 and get terminated, or she
Mm-hmm.
can be at my 5 o'clock meeting. I'm not disrupting my day for a non-compliant employee.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. They brought her in, and I looked at her straight in the eye. I said, I'm helping you here.
Mm-hmm.
Got to tell you, you're non-compliant. Well, I'm not in the Army. I said, oh, yes, you are. Your paycheck says U.S. government. You're a
Mm-hmm.
Department of Army civilian.
Mm-hmm.
You don't wear no uniform. You don't jump out no helicopters, but you work for the Army,
Mm-hmm.
and that's your new job. Here's a letter. I'm telling you, it's a counseling. That's where you're going to be. You show up at the fire station one more time, you're going to be suspended, put on administrative leave without pay.
Mm-hmm.
You can come back, you show up at the fire station again, you're going to be fired.
Mm-hmm. Well, she one of them GS 100s or something. Been there for 10 years and
Yeah. I think she was like about a GS 7 or 8 or something, but you know,
yeah, yeah.
she
Just
she
don't want to change.
she was not happy, so she filed all sorts of complaints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was picking on her.
Mm-hmm. So now you got a complaint filed.
Yeah, oh, I just
Like I imagine you probably had a lot of them. I mean,
if you if there ain't no complaints, you ain't doing your job.
exactly. That's right. That's right. So in the end, I mean, you got that area all straight, right? And then they probably moved you out once you
Yeah,
everything in working order.
our reshaping St. Louis was about 70% by the time they moved me to Fort Campbell, but St. Louis was in the process of closing what they call it BRAC when they were doing BRAC
Mm-hmm.
because Aviation Troop Command moved to Anniston, Alabama, and became Aviation Missile Command.
Okay.
They combined with a missile command that was there. So it was right on the verge of this bracking going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got reassigned to Fort Campbell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is that where you ended it?
No, I left Fort Campbell. I went back to be the chief of staff for the National Defense University
Mm-hmm.
at Fort McNair.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew something was kind of up because Colonel Division would kind of call me and say, Gene, um, when do you think about retiring?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, mandatory retirement is 30 years.
Right.
He said, yeah, but you've already had like 4 colonel jobs already, and most of the time, colonels, may have 2 or 3 jobs before they retire, and we're just, you know, just kind of saying. So, um, I said, well, okay, let me kind of think about it, and I'll get back with you in a couple of months. He said, okay, well, that'd be all right. We just want to, and I said, hey, I mean, let's get the cat out the bag. Okay, I'm not hung up about being a general.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm about 4 grades higher than what I ever should be.
Mm-hmm.
I've been blessed to be at that time. I'm blessed to be a colonel for more than 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me a senior colonel, and most time nobody messes with me. Okay,
Right.
uh, so yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I'm holding up someone else from getting promoted. And
Well, not to cut you off,
yeah,
but you with all of that you had already done, that would be your next step, Brigadier General.
yeah.
Um, so what would it have taken for you to make that transition from
Well,
colonel to brig?
well, my mentors used to always tell me I didn't really have a lot of Pentagon time.
You had time, but you didn't have a lot of Pentagon. Is
Yeah.
that a big requirement?
Well, it kind of is, which
Mm-hmm.
I kind of understand. I spent, like I say, by being an infantryman and an aviator,
Mm-hmm.
I, I I spent a lot of my time in infantry divisions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I commanded two let's see, the headquarters company, B company, aviation company, because you command in aviation as a major.
Mm-hmm.
I commanded the battalion in the 101st. That's task force level work,
Mm-hmm.
and I commanded the garrison, and I had 2 chief of staff jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So I I was kind of at the point that if I hadn't made it, and it's a challenge to make because the way the process kind of worked, you got to have some generals sitting on that board that know you real well, or you have worked for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best chance I had, one of my bosses in Panama had eventually become a 4-star, and I didn't know until it had already happened. But he was going to be the president. It's a 4. The newest 4-star is generally the president of the Brigadier General Board in the Army,
Mm-hmm.
and he was going to do that, but he got ill and couldn't sit on the board. They thought he had a brain tumor, but fortunately he didn't.
Uh-huh.
And so someone else sat on. Uh, you know, that probably could have been if I was going to have a good chance.
Mm-hmm.
But after you get over, I would say maybe about 4 years in grade,
Okay.
uh, they're probably not going to pick you up. Sometimes they pick up what we call a colonel who's really long in the tooth, kind of older colonel.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
and and it just kind of it. Some people say it's affectionately called a beauty contest.
Mm-hmm.
You got to, and my file ain't all that pretty because it's just a lot of troop work.
Mm-hmm. I got you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
when I was thinking about it, and I ran into General Powell at Howard, a friend of mine, young friend of mine. Uh, he was a professor of Army ROTC there at Howard,
Mm-hmm.
and he was trying to get Howard alumni to come back for the commissioning, and he had called me and asked would I come. He told me General Powell was going to speak. I said, okay, yeah, I'll come, and I came. And General Powell was now retired. He
Okay.
was setting up America Promise, the Alliance for Youth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bumped into him at the commission, and we talked for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me, um, what was I going to do? And I said, well, sir, I guess I'm really considering retiring. I mean, I could probably hang around at National Defense University for another year, get 29. That they're going to force me out. I said, he said, well, yeah. He said, let me kind of think about it. I said, oh, okay. You never steer me wrong. I appreciate that. Sunday, my daughter, I was taking a nap, and my daughter was home from college and
Mm-hmm.
for the summer, and she came woke me up and said, Dad, General Powell wants to talk to you. He's on the phone. I said, what? I said, okay. And so I went, he said, look, I kind of got this idea, and I'm going to get you a Secretary of Defense fellowship, and you're going to be assigned to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be a 6-month fellowship. You'll help me. The president said I could have anything I wanted to help stand up America's promise.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be assigned to me. You come over here and work. And then after you retire, we think about finding you a position here. So that's what I did. Uh,
Okay.
the following week, I got a phone call from my assignment guy. I said, Gene, you just got selected with Secretary of Army Fellowship. I said,
Mm.
so I kind of, oh, really? What? Because most time they give you that, they send you to a school like Harvard or something to take an executive course. He said, no, you're going to be assigned to General Powell.
Mm. Okay.
I said, okay, so yeah, that's what I did, and then I retired after I finished that fellowship.
Okay. How long did you do that?
That was for 6 months.
6 months with General Powell. Okay.
Yeah, I did that from I did that from October '97
Mm-hmm.
to, let's see, October, November, December, January, February, March. I did that to March. Then I took terminal leave,
Mm-hmm.
which is about 45 days of, that they give you 2 weeks permissive TDY.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bunch of leave
Mm-hmm.
uh, to cash in. And then out processing time, that's another 10 days. So that took me right up to the 1st of May.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. And that ended it, huh?
Yep, that did it.
So looking back at all of that, what do you got to say about that whole career of yours in the military?
Chester, I tell you, all the experiences, all the wonderful people I met,
Mm-hmm.
even some of the people that weren't so wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
all of that really helped prepare me for the phase of my life after the military.
Mm-hmm.
Because after that, working for General Powell for a while, uh, then I did some security contract work.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went back to be a Department of Army civilian. I was a deputy uh, garrison commander for the Fort Myer military community, which include Fort Myer and Fort McNair, GS-15 job.
Okay.
And I stayed there about 5 years, and then I left there and went back to doing security contract work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it did help prepare me because when I got out of the service, if somebody would have told me I would have had another 7 and 8 jobs in the next 10 years, I think I would have fainted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
But you meet it's the people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's the people. It's it's a thing about being an infantryman. If you're infantryman, you got to settle in your mind that you're going to go and fight,
Yeah.
and
That's right.
you got to fight and win. It's not just showing up for a fight.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be ready to fight and win.
Yes, sir.
You got to get people in that same mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and the non-commissioned officers. I mean, I just had great sergeants,
Mm-hmm.
great from E5 all the way up to E9.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some that weren't so great that we had to get rid of
Right.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
because, as one of my sergeant majors used to say, Charlie White, God bless his soul, he's passed.
Mm-hmm.
She was uh, my battalion sergeant major at Campbell, and he used to say, sir, and in fact, he was a commissioned officer and got rifted,
Mm-hmm.
the captain, and reverted back to E7 and
Mm-hmm.
made it up to E9 and then command sergeant major. He say, sir, you know what? These NCOs, they're going to run this outfit. You and the officers lead it.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I said, Sergeant Major, I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because I used to hate when we went out to the field to train because all sorts of horse manure can go wrong.
Yeah.
And I said, Sergeant Major, I want you and the first sergeant take the battalion out for 3 days. I'm going to take the officers over here, and we're going to run what's called a exercise without troops, so we can walk through our battle plans on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
placement of weapons, range cards, and all that. And we'll do that for 3 days. Then we'll come back and we'll do exercises
Mm-hmm.
and shoot at the range. And
Mm-hmm.
because I love shooting at the range. They give you an annual allocation of different ammo,
Mm-hmm.
but most units commanders weren't using them. I shoot their allocation too.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're in the infantry, you got to know how to fight.
That's
You
right.
got to be able to pick up your tools and get after it.
Right.
Uh, so it was just that drive. Um, and it was kind of a letdown for about a month that, you're not getting up, going to run in the morning with troops around.
Mm-hmm.
And some people used to ask me when I first retired, what do you miss the most? I said, well, there's two things I really do miss here from being here back in the DC area. So what's that? I said, well, I miss all the soldiers
Mhm.
and and the civilians too. I mean, I just kind of missed that. And I said, and I miss my driver and my helicopter. I, I miss those two things. Okay.
Your driver, your helicopter.
Yeah, I miss my driver and my van and my Hummer
Yeah.
and my helicopter.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Are you a religious man?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm a Catholic.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna ask you this final question. And I meant to ask it to Bill Jordan, but I didn't get a chance to, but I'm gonna get him on the next one. I'm gonna ask you this final question and I'm gonna let you go.
Okay.
Now, one day we all gonna blink, and
That's
when we open my eyes up, we're gonna be heading up toward that pearly gate. And when you meet that gatekeeper, and he look you in whatever form you in, and tell you, Eugene Davis, your mission is complete. Job well done. What is your final words before you enter this gate?
if it goes like that, and it's interesting. You bring. I lost my wife in 23rd of June 1993. She was short of her 43rd birthday. She
Mm.
had a brain aneurysm in her sleep,
Wow.
and that that makes you think about a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
I went from being a family, a parent of one daughter, to being a single parent, even though she was just graduated high school and was going to college. Uh,
Mhm.
so if I'm even lucky to see the pearly gates,
Mhm.
I just want to say I'm sorry for all my sins and wrongs, and thank you for whatever you can do for me.
Mhm. Well, we'll end it right there, Eugene.
Yes, sir.
Man,
Well,
I appreciate you coming out and talking with me, hanging out on the edge. This is gonna be let me see, we've been talking for 2 hours